It was literally in the woods. And he asked me a question that he's like, what do you love to do? And I thought about it and I was like, I don't know, like sell record store. It's just the only thing I've ever done. He's like, what if you could pick one thing, didn't matter what it cost, didn't matter what training you had to have, nothing. What is the one thing that you would want to do on a daily basis for the rest of your life? And what's funny is like it didn't hit me then until Jackson, he was living with me at my condo because he had just moved back to Nashville. And I called him and I was telling him, we were talking on the way back because it's like an 8-hour drive. And I think it was him that first said it. He was like, what if we opened up a clothing store? Ready?
Man, I appreciate you coming in today. And I love this studio. It's awesome. So I just kind of wanted to start out. How did this all come to be? Where'd the love of fashion come from?
Honestly, ever since I was little, I looked for any excuse to wear a suit, whether it be church, anything. Growing up, I had to wear, like I played basketball, so you had to wear a tie on game day, and it's like I actually enjoyed it. Fast forward to high school, I got best dressed in high school, which looking back on the yearbook photo, I don't know how that was possible, but it was just always...
What type of fashion were you rocking back then?
Big and baggy.
Yeah.
Kind of preppy, which is not my style anymore. So it's kind of funny to see like the progression of what I've worn and different styles that I now have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking through your Instagram before I came over here and kind of scrolling way back to the Ole Miss days, and a lot more Orvis and Barber.
I was about to say,
is that just kind of like a consequence of being in Oxford?
Yeah, a little bit of Ole Miss, but I mean I'm a big hunter, and I was even made fun of in the duck blind because I'm wearing a Barber jacket, and it's like that's not for hunting. I was like, well, it's technically for
it
hunting,
is. It's a bird jacket.
Yeah, and for me, it was either camo, Barber, anything hunting related, or like casual, like Lululemon, but then suits. And then people ask all the time, like, do you hate having to wear a suit every day? I was like, no, I got into the industry for a reason. I enjoy it. It's what I feel most comfortable in, by far. But
you think we've kind of lost something with the fact that people don't wear suits anymore, right? Because like when I grew up, even like in high school, we had a dress code, and I feel like when you went to weddings, you had to wear a tie. And over time, you kind of see it get a little more casual. But there is something, right, when you put on like a really good suit, that feeling you get, of looking good.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think that's half of it, to where, and people, it doesn't offend me at all, but when they find out what I do, they're like, oh, I hate having to wear a suit. And it's like, all right, well, thanks. That's how I make my living. But more so, I think it's that they've never owned something that they either felt comfortable in, that fit them well, that was comfortable, in an actual comfort standpoint. So something that's not, starchy, itchy. Because it's amazing when guys will come in that loathe having to wear a suit. And they might just need one for weddings, funerals, regretfully, just a go-to suit. And they put it on and they see how they look and they realize it's like, no, I've just never had something that was made specifically for me.
Right.
And then it's like they're looking for excuses to wear suits. And for me, I mean, ever since I was little, that didn't always fit great, but it was what I felt most comfortable in any room that I'd go in. If I was in a suit, like when I graduated college, I worked for my dad's company. I had to wear a suit every day.
Right.
It's like I had my favorite suit, my favorite shirt, my favorite tie, pocket square socks back when I wore them, shoes. It's like that was what made me feel the most confident, the most comfortable. And I think that's where a lot of guys that they don't have to wear them, especially for work places being a little bit more casual. But the trend I've been seeing is that they're looking for more excuses too. They're just like, I work a desk job or something that's not client facing. I don't have to wear a suit. I don't have to dress up nice. I can wear a golf polo and pants. But it's the fact that it's, ever since COVID too, people wearing
really
sweatpants.
Yeah, it's bad.
Well, and it's like I've seen both sides of it. I've seen guys that it's like, I've been in sweatpants for the past year. I want to dress up. I want to go to events. I want to get out there. And it's,
That's how I feel because I work from home. Like I'm fully remote now. The company I work for is based out of Miami. I'm here. And I feel shitty and have such a hard time working when I just get up and like put on a pair of shorts or sweatpants. I have to force myself, and I don't wear a suit, but just
Put some effort into getting ready.
Yeah.
I did when I was about to say when I first started, I was working out of my condo. I'd have one appointment a week, and so everything else that I was doing was like planning and trying to figure out how to get in this industry. And certain days where it's like I wouldn't leave the condo, but I realized it's like I was in sweatpants, I was in a t-shirt, didn't even shower.
Even as you're trying to start this business.
Yeah, and it's like it's look good, feel good, play good type thing mentality. And it's like I'd be sitting there on the couch and I was like, I feel lazy. I don't feel like I'm actually at work.
Yep.
Granted, I'm working for myself. I can wear whatever I want, but it was something about actually getting ready. And that's when I forced myself to join a co-working space. I didn't need it. It was only $50 a month, so all I got was
get up and go somewhere.
Get up, shower, go somewhere where people would see me. It also helped with, networking of when I started to wear suits. And I joke and say I got in the industry because everybody would ask me, why are you always in a suit? And it's like, I did it so people would stop asking me that question. Because if they find out what I do, they're like, oh, that makes sense. That's why you're wearing a suit.
Right.
It's just one of those things where it's not as common as it used to be, especially the 90s. But I think it's making a little bit of a comeback in terms of want, not have to.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the 90s. What is it? Why was it that suits were so baggy? I feel like up until 2012, I was watching, I don't know if you saw the Last Dance documentary.
Mm-mm. Well, yes,
Jordan
yes,
doc,
yes,
right?
yes.
And he's wearing a suit before every game, and they're like a square. And he was wearing nice
Oh, yeah.
suits.
Well, and that's...
But I just don't see how that style look.
Men's fashion's a revolving door.
Yeah.
I mean, from the 20s, that era of suits, up into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 60s and 70s, things starting to get a little bit baggier. 80s, same thing. 90s, same thing. And I think that's what, if you were buying custom in that era, you were doing it solely for quality, not for fit. Because you could find that
Quality
fit.
of the material.
Yeah. Anywhere that you go, you can find that fit because it's just oversized. And that's what I hate it, because it's like there's people in my industry that are in their 60s, 70s that they're not adapting to the change of what styles have done because they're kind of stuck in their ways. I know I'm probably going to be that person because I like things trim. I like it to be that athletic looking fit. And if it goes back to being that 90s baggy style, early 2000s, like if you look at LeBron's draft class and what they wore and on stage, and then you look at
Even
2019,
were super baggy, right?
And everything started becoming shorter, tighter.
What is it that's why? Who's driving that change? I've always been interested in this. I mean, men's not as much as women's, right? But why is it that all of a sudden
places like Italy, they'll be the front runners for certain fashions. Like right now, for guys, what's going to be coming in style here, and we're like 10 years behind almost on
Really?
men's fashion. Yeah, we don't adapt well to it, and it starts in little pockets like New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas.
Is it just designers putting stuff out there and then
It's kind of like who chooses the Pantone color of the year. I was like, is there a committee that literally sits down and it's like, all right, it's this shade of purple.
What is Pantone?
It's a shade of the color.
Gotcha.
For me, I've always been the type to where I don't chase after trends. It might take me a long time to adopt something. And if I finally do, that's fine. I'm not doing it. I want to be fashion forward, but at the same time, my whole motto for everything I do in my business is comfort. It's for not what I'm trying to please somebody else for what I wear. It's pleasing myself. I do not get ready in the morning and think, what is everybody else going to like? I will dress to my appointments. So if somebody's looking for a sport coat and jeans, I might wear that day. If somebody's looking for something with a big bold pattern, it does make it easier to see it on me. Mm-hmm. But used to, there was one client I had early on that he was this old banker, and I was like, all right, I'm going to wear the biggest suit I have, which wasn't that big, but just something, just something that I think that he would like. And when he booked the appointment, he did it through my website, and he said that he came from Instagram. That's where he originally found it. When I came in, I'm wearing like a solid suit, solid tie, like plain shirt. Everything was just very banker-ish, what I thought was. And he just starts flipping through the fabrics. He's like, so where's all the bold patterns and colors that I saw over your Instagram? He was like, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then I realized it, and I was like, why did I dressed to somebody that I didn't even know. I had no idea what he wanted. And that's where I hit the point where it's like, I'm going to dress with what I feel like wearing. Yes, I will change things for a sales standpoint, just to make somebody more comfortable, and I can show them exactly what a 3-piece suit looks like on me. But yeah, going from 90s, early 2000s and on up, even in college, I go back going to the Grove and what I would wear, and I thought, like,
bad.
yeah, and I was like, damn, those pants were so big. But at the time, they were what was in style.
I know. I remember the day where I realized how big all my shit was, and I was like, I don't think I'm big enough to be wearing larges.
Have you seen the picture of my side by side? This is embarrassing. But I honestly,
have to flash this up.
I wore this. It's one of my oldest pictures. It's like right when I started in the industry, I had to wear a suit every day working for my dad. I did the Joseph Bank buy 4, get like half the store free.
Yeah.
And I wore it every single day, and I thought it was the best fitting thing I'd ever worn.
Oh, that's so bad.
I wish, my biggest regret in all of my fashion, anything in the past, I wish I would have kept that suit. I think I threw it away because I was so embarrassed by it.
Show people how
so I could
bad
show
it
people.
looks.
And that was the difference of 6 months. I didn't lose weight.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I didn't get shorter, taller. I'm the exact same size. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm looking at this suit, and I was like, I had changed like 7 things on it of my newer suit.
Right.
But I think that's the difference between fashion then, fashion now. It's like I'm always adapting to something
think it'll
different.
go back at some point to that baggy look? It just looks so bad.
Well, with what's coming up now, high-waisted pants, single pleat, probably not a double. And when people think of pleats and cuffs, they think of the 90s style. Mm-hmm. This is a more modern, it's not as trim as things are being worn right now. It's a little bit more tasteful of the in-between, that slim and that baggy look. It's like intentional. Some things are a little bit oversized. Ties are getting a little bit wider, a little bit more geometrical with, patterns and designs. Mm-hmm. And it's something where I see it and I'm like, that's not my style right now. Will I adapt to it? Maybe. But it is funny that somebody's in the driver's seat and I have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
But they're the ones that will
It
basically
just
pick
happens.
out. Yeah.
So when guys come in here, how many of them kind of know what they want? How much are you guiding them? Is it just run the full gambit, or do you ever have a guy where you're just like, dude,
I've got a nice little mixed bag.
Yeah.
Some guys will come in and they need it for their wedding. They need it for weddings that they're attending. They need it for work. They need, the ones that have been through the process before, they'll always have the most fun with it because they know what they're doing. They know all the intention behind all the design options. Most guys, I'd say probably 7 out of 10 will say, what should I do?
Yeah.
But I'll give them options, meaning if they pick out their fabric for their suit, then I'd show the lining on the inside of the jacket. And they just get overwhelmed. I mean, guys, 9 out of 10 will say that they're colorblind. And I was like, you're not colorblind.
So what is that process? Like somebody walks in the door, how does it kind of go from there? Is it swatches or?
Yeah, we start downstairs. We go through like an initial consultation. So, and we do a lot of this through email too, but what it is they're looking for, if it's that go-to suit, if it's everyday suit that they wear to work, if it's for their wedding, talk about what they're interested in, 2-piece, 3-piece, sport coat, slacks, jeans, whatever. And then we take their body measurements. So we take about 40 body measurements. It takes about 20 plus minutes. Then we also go over preference measurements. So I can take a tape to your body all day long, but I don't know how you want something to fit.
Right.
So I'll request for them to bring in their best fitting of anything that they own that they're getting measured for. And most guys will come in saying like they're embarrassed to bring it in, and that's when I show them that picture, and I'm like,
it's okay.
I've been there. You might think it's
get
embarrassing, but
Yeah.
everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah.
And then once we go over preference measurements and body measurements, we come up here. This is like what we call the design loft.
Pretty
You can
sweet
see,
up here.
yeah, you can see we've got a lot of fabric books.
Is that what all these things are on this back wall?
It's my version of a library.
So that's just all different swatches, and color patterns?
Yeah.
Where do those come from? Is it just
Italy, England, mainly. Fabric mills. Some of these fabric mills have been around for 200 plus years.
Yeah.
Some are pretty new. Some are like resellers of fabrics, so they'll buy out like overstock or something that the dye lot and the color of a fabric that they were trying to make didn't quite turn out what they wanted it to be, so they're trying to get rid of it. Getting in the industry, completely naive. I had no idea about any of this. I'd been through the process because I bought my first custom suit when I was working for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I fell in love with the process. And
Right.
I was like, this is cool. You get to pick out your fabric, your buttons, your lining. It can be overwhelming for guys, especially when they see all this and then they realize, well, I don't travel to people's homes and offices as much because not as much, really never. Just because it's, I've got everything here and, people ask, I want this pattern with these colors. Do you have that? I was like, well, we have it. It'll take me a minute to find it. Certain fabric mills that we use intentions behind using them. So whether it's a performance fabric, some with stretch, some that are better on wrinkles, some that are better on travel, some that have bolder, brighter colors, some that are more monotone. So
Right.
that consultation down there kind of paves the way for me to go through and figure out, all right,
How long does that take? Ish.
for the full appointment,
Yeah. Or just that initial consult.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
Sometimes it's 2 questions and I'm like, all right, we're done. I already know what you're looking for. And it's getting to know them by measuring them. I can figure out, all right, they're not going to be going for that, flashy pattern. They want something that's a little bit more monotone, a little bit more subdued. But it never fails when we get up here and I think I know them and I start pulling out fabrics and then they're like, I kind of like this one. I was like, that's bolder than I thought you would have gone. But
Right.
then I have some clients that they've never stepped foot inside here other than to get measured. And then they say, pick it out for me. I trust you, which I love doing. I really do. It's my favorite part is the design. I hate measuring people. That's my least favorite part, but it's the most important. But when I get to because it's like I design for myself, all my suits, but to do it for somebody else and to know that they trust me, it's a lot of fun because it's me getting to do it for somebody, not myself.
Yeah.
But it's some guys, it's also fun to watch them get excited about it. They might come in and they're, a little bit stern sounding and they don't want to be there, but they have to have a suit for work. And then I start showing them the fabrics and then the linings. And then it's like they graduate, it's like a snowball. They keep getting more excited about it. And then by the end, they're like, how long does this take again?
Like keep getting to customize more and more and
options that they never knew that you could. That it's funny. It's always the older guys are like what I consider like my hunting clients. Where it's like they're not supposed to be excited about fashion. They're burly guys that they're in the woods all the time, and then we have linings that are hunting related, and it's like
wife wants them to get a suit for the Christmas party or something.
Exactly, or their wedding, and they're like, she said I get to pick the lining, but she has to pick everything else out. But it's a lot of fun for them when they come back. They can see the intentions behind everything that they design, and they're like, oh, that's why you suggested to do this button with this color or whatever. And then they're kind of hooked on it because after that point, once we nail down your fit, we just get to do the fun part, which is easier.
Yeah. So what is the difference, and this kind of goes into what we were just talking about, is there a difference between made to measure, or when people say, I think the word custom gets thrown out kind of willy-nilly? Because I've done like the
bastardized
Jay
a little bit.
Hilburn, you go in, they give you a couple measurements. What's the difference between that and like a true bespoke?
So there's like custom, there's bespoke, there's made to measure. A lot of the terms are thrown around. I started out made to measure, and I didn't like it as much. Probably because I wasn't good at it. Because essentially, made to measure, you're using an existing, which I've got some downstairs, paper patterns. So, like when you order through us, everything's from scratch by hand, original paper pattern. So paper pattern is literally the outline tracing of your garment that we put up against fabric, cut around it, start from there. Whereas made to measure, you're starting with an existing paper pattern, and the most simple way I can put this is you're altering an existing suit. Even though everything's being put together from the fabric to the lining to the buttons, you're choosing all of that, but they're having to base it off of an existing paper pattern, and it's not original. Okay. So when I was in
what's the difference between that and like a swatch that you're showing somebody?
So the fabric swatch, I mean, that's what you pick out. That's just the sample books. I've got some bolts of fabric here, but most of them come in 54 to 58 inch panels. So it's a table about 3 times the size of this, where you lay it out, trace it out in chalk, what all your measurements are, cut it, sew it together. I mean, pattern matching, it's a ridiculous art. It's also a lost art. But made to measure, you're limited on a lot of options too. And most of these places that do made to measure, like a lot of the online ones like Jay Hilburn, Truemaker, Tom James, Alton Lane. They're great companies. They're just limited in certain things that they do, whether it be somebody's measurements or design options. And we have, I keep saying I'd show you, but I'm not going to get up right now. Somebody came in a couple Saturdays ago, and she wanted her wedding suit to basically be like a veil, and this thing's going to go all the way down to the ground and keep going. And people have brought in sketchings before of this is what I want to be the suit.
You can do that.
If you can provide a picture or some type of direction, we can do it. Doesn't matter your size. My biggest client's 6'8", 450. Tallest client's 7 foot. Shortest client's 2.5 feet tall, I think. Which now he's probably like 4 feet tall. No, yeah, well, that'd be a dream. Probably give me a little too much attitude, but
probably would. He might try to beat you up.
Yeah, wondering about his bicep measurement. Yeah, I mean, we've made suits for little kids. We made suits for grown adults. We made suits for everybody in between, man,
so basically,
woman.
all you need is the fabric and enough of it, or if it's a big person.
Yeah, and people think like, is it much more expensive? Because everything that we price out, it's per yard or per meter. So if somebody's a little bit taller with a bigger chest, it's going to cost a little bit more than mine would. But it's not by much. I mean, the more expensive fabric, because fabric can be anything from, $100 a yard to thousands of dollars a yard.
It seems like the material's what's driving the price, right? More than the...
Yeah, and so we don't have, this isn't a retail store. You're literally looking through swatch books and designing everything from scratch. So to price things out, we roughly give a ballpark of the ranges of books, depending on their budget or comfort level for spending. And I tell them, it's like, all right, I'm going to calculate your yardage. We order to 1/8 of a yard of what we actually need. So we don't have much scrap left over. And to be able to do that, to streamline it and to be accurate with how many yards or meters that we need, really helps with the entire process, especially with pricing. Because some guys can come in, they can order the exact same suit. One guy's suit might be $50 more. It's always hard when talking about pricing because I just tell them where our suits start out at, what they average at, and what they can go up to. And whatever you want in between, that's fine. But that's also part of the consultation that we do is if somebody comes in and says, I'm on a plane 2-3 days a week, I'm traveling all the time, I need something that's going to be great on wrinkles, I can beat the hell out of it, something that's still going to be comfortable. It's like I've got, a dozen books that I'm not going to make you buy from that, and not saying that they're the least expensive, they're also not the most expensive, but tried and true, I know that these are good for what you need. Right. Same thing for a guy that comes in that he's like, hey, I need this for like 4 to 5 weddings and hopefully not, but a funeral throughout the year. I'm not going to tell him, hey, you need this type of fabric. That's in a way more expensive price range. And granted, it's like some people, they don't care if they only wear it 4 times a year. They want the nicest of whatever it is. But I tell them it's like, this will get you by. And these are the benefits of going with fabrics that are in a higher price range. Entry-level fabric, our entry-level fabric is great fabric. You have to start somewhere. It's kind of like a Mercedes. You can go up in class. But that initial consult, that's what really, and I'll tell them, I was like, if you don't want to spend more than what the entry level is, you can do that. Right. But over time, it's not meant to take that type of wear and tear. But there are fabrics that are meant for it.
Right. Are you just doing suits, or like? No. I'm sure you got a lot of guys that are rocking nice jeans and a sport,
Yeah, I mean jeans. We do Blue Delta jeans out of Tupelo in Oxford. But originally, when I first started this, I did zero market research. I just happened to hit it at a good time where people wanted things that fit better than what you could buy off the rack. Right. But I was like, Nashville's a sport coat town. Anybody that ever been in business with or friends, networking is, like everybody wears sport coats.
In general, kind of, right? Yeah, you see a lot of that in Oxford.
We sell 4 times as many suits as we do.
No kidding.
Sport coats, yeah. And I always pitch sport coats. I'm like, they're cheaper. You can get more of them. You can filter them in and out. But then once they find out, like, oh, you mean I can wear my suit jacket as a sport coat? And they're like, yeah, add the pants to it. There are limitations to that, but overall,
I always heard you weren't supposed to do that because of the colors might, or is that just...
Dr. Andre Churchwell, he's a very famous physician, was out of Atlanta, now he's at Vandy, and I heard him speak at this event. He said, you have to know the rules of fashion before you can break them. And that just hit home because I'm like, I don't wear socks. You're supposed to wear socks. I don't wear a belt. You're supposed to wear a belt. Like certain things that you know that you're doing wrong or wrong, but that you have confidence in whatever you're doing and you think you look good, you like it, that's all that matters. And that's one of those things where, like, suit jacket, what I consider to be the difference between a suit jacket and a sport coat, one, the length of a suit jacket would be a little bit longer, and then the buttons are typically tone on tone with whatever the color of the suit is. There are certain materials that are better for being a jacket and not, you really shouldn't make pants out of them. Right. I do it all the time just because I have so many suits that it doesn't really matter. I'm not putting as much wear and tear on them. But like this, perfect example, I wear this as a sport coat. Solid blue pants, solid gray pants, jeans. Because my jacket length's a little bit shorter, the whole purpose of the back of the jacket is to cover your butt. That's it.
Really?
But you can put contrasting buttons on it to where it doesn't look like, and that's what got real popular, like probably 2010 and up, is to have a blue suit with brown buttons on it. Because it didn't look like you were wearing that same blue suit, blue button that you get from every department store, and it matches the shoes whenever you start wearing brown shoes with blue suits.
I feel like you see that with button downs, like the white button downs with like with different colored buttons on.
I probably have 200 shirts. A lot of them are white. I don't think I have a single one that's white shirt with white buttons, or the shell button that comes on the cover shirt.
That's something so simple and cheap that makes such
that's
a
like the
difference
thing
in the
that
way the suit look,
when they come back to pick everything up, they're like, I'm so glad you convinced me to put like a different colored button on the shirt, because for me it like replaces a tie. Again, when I wake up in the morning, that's when I'm like, do I want to wear a tie today? In fact, I brought my tie. I didn't even put it on today. Because I typically get ready here just because I get here so early that I might not see somebody for 4 hours when I first come in, when I first start having appointments at like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't put unnecessary stress on suits when I don't have to. So yeah, I come in sweatpants and I get ready here, and sometimes I'm like, you know what, I just don't really care to wear the tie today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. I have a couple, I think they're Jay Hilburn shirts, and even that, I think just the stitching on the buttons. It's like a white and blue shirt with blue stitching, and that's
such a subtle thing.
Yeah,
that makes a huge difference. And guys will say that when they come back, because they'll do like one shirt that had like a contrasting button, and then they come back for their next round of shirts and they're like, I don't want a tone on tone button ever again. Is I make at least one shirt with every suit that I make, and the intentions behind it, like this actually wasn't for the suit, but when you have so many, you can kind of start mixing them in. And
I like the double buttons.
That's probably the only collar I've had for 2 years. And I get like stuck on something and I don't leave it for a while, and then I realize like, all right, I gotta start changing some things up. But I always tell guys, it's like, if you're not wearing a tie, if you wear a tie, you just have to button one of them. But it's just a different look, and it's little things that people might not. If I were to ask somebody what's different about what I'm wearing, I don't think that they could actually, on the first try, pinpoint exactly what it is. But then when I tell them, they're like, I noticed that, but it's not something that stands out too much.
It's kind of one of those things where it looks good. You mean it looks good, but you don't know necessarily why. You can't put a thumb on it.
Yeah, and like it's called a covered placket. Like that tuck shirt has it, to where the buttons aren't exposed. It's like a formal thing.
Yeah.
And I'll do it on some shirts. Honestly, if I can't figure out what button color I want to choose, I'll just make it covered, so it's literally can't see buttons. And guys will look at me and be like, something's different about your shirt. And I was like, you can't see the buttons. And like, oh, that's it. It's like something doesn't click. And that's what's nice, is to get guys, like when they come in here and maybe they want like a, subtle blue suit, just a go-to boring suit for work, for attending weddings. But then on the lining on the inside, it's like, all right, maybe I don't try to get them outside of their comfort zone too much, but just one step, just so that, it's a different experience than they get from just going to the store. And it's always the lining, to where it's like, I'll kind of push them. It's like, look, it's a little bit bolder than what you might have been thinking, but it's not something that's really going to be seen unless you show it to them.
Yeah.
And linings are always where they'll have some fun, because it's on the inside. So
do you have guys that you've kind of like, they come in, maybe the first suit they buy, they'll do the lining, and then you kind of see them progressively get a little more brazen as it's going on? Oh yeah, and that's what I was talking about earlier about. I like when they start to get excited about the design process, because then the next time they come in, they're like, oh, now we're on to buttons, right? Or now we're on to, what about the thread color? And it's like now they're already comfortable with the lining. One of my favorite clients, he was referred by like 2 people between us, and he first started out, he wears a suit every day for work. He works in a job that
everybody wears suits, and so he sends all the guys like on his team over here, and we did like a company fitting to where like 6 of them came in, and I'm sitting there measuring, and it's like managing like children almost. They're all having to go through fabric books, and if they have different price points or different needs, it's like having to herd cats of like, all right, we got to figure out what everybody wants to design. I came up one time and he had already like pulled out. He's like, this is gonna be this guy's fabric, this is his lining, these are his buttons, and I'm like, should I hire you? I mean, you're literally doing my job, and did it well too. But it is fun to watch them progress because I don't have anybody directly in mind. Actually, she's probably in my top 2 or 3 favorite clients. She has the most fun with the design, and she owns a liquor store. She doesn't have to come in here to buy suits. She chooses to wear them, and that's always not a favorite client, but they just have more fun with it as opposed to being
kind of constrained.
They're like, I have to wear a suit to work, so I have to come buy this. But she chooses to, and she has fun with it, whether it's colors, patterns. I mean, she gets down to options that I don't really give almost any client, but I give her because they're things that I pick, because after a certain point, especially with guys, after their like 4th decision, they're just checked out. They're like, I don't even care anymore. Just pick it for me.
How many options could you put? I mean, is that a loaded question?
How
many are people typically doing?
I don't even have a number for that. The main ones are lapel style, pockets, vent in the back, style of pants, flat front pleats, plain down to the bottom, cuffs, belt loops, no belt loops. Monogram, name on the inside, lining. But like sleeve color on the inside. I always joke and say it's like my guilty pleasure that I get to pick their sleeve color, because I don't give it to them because it's just a pointless thing to pick out. Right. It's just to match whatever the lining was, because we don't line the sleeves in the same as the lining. But she will, and she'll pick out, like, if you wanted to change every single buttonhole color and button thread color. I had a guy for his wedding. It was like staggered, like 4 different colors, and the buttons were different colors. It's like you can design literally whatever you want. Some people like do 2 lapel buttonholes as opposed to 1. Somebody's vest has different color buttonholes than the jacket did. It's just, it can become like too much. Like, you don't want people to have to come in, because I only have like 2 appointments a day. If you could literally pick out every single thing. But these are all the main things. Like, typically we don't ask them what they want underneath the collar in the back. We just use the lining. But it's little things that kind of add up with a lot of guys that they appreciate that they get to choose. Because when I first went through the process, it was my best friend's older brother who I'm really close with, and he sat me down, did the process, and at the time it was my first time doing it, so I didn't know that there were other options until the guy that got me into this industry, who kind of mentored me, he was saying like, oh, you get to do this and this and this, and I was like, I wouldn't even know.
Kind of opened your eyes.
Yeah, I was like, there's a lot more to design than I actually thought there was. So
what was that whole process like? Kind of, I would love to hear about, because you said you worked for your dad, and obviously at some point,
about
peace out and start doing this.
2.5 years, kind of came to it. It's a family business that I've been doing since I was 14, legally, getting paid since I was 14, but I've been working there since I was 5. I mean, completely unrelated industry. It's off-site record storage, shredding, scanning. It's not the sexiest industry to talk about, but it has definitely provided an incredible life for our family and my parents. It just wasn't for me. I was never really happy. Other than bartending at Ole Miss, it was the only job I had literally ever received a paycheck from. Yeah. And so when I graduated, I was like, this is, I've literally been bred to do this my entire life. And it was the very first day when something just didn't click. And it took 2.5 years until that tipping point. But my dad, he told me after we parted ways, he said, hey, we've got family friends down in South Georgia we go hunting with and stay with them, and they own a company like my dad's. He was like, go down, talk to Mr. Powell, figure out what it is you want to do in your life. And
there's no place like the woods to do that, right?
It was literally in the woods. And he asked me a question that he's like, what do you love to do? And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know, like sell record store. It's just the only thing I've ever done. He's like, what if you could pick one thing, didn't matter what it cost, didn't matter what training you had to have, nothing. What is the one thing that you would want to do on a daily basis for the rest of your life? And what's funny is like it didn't hit me then until Jackson. He was living with me at my condo because he had just moved back to Nashville. And I called him and I was telling him, we were talking on the way back because it's like an 8-hour drive. And I think it was him that first said it. He was like, what if we opened up a clothing store? And I was like, that's a terribly awesome idea. And from that moment, we talked for like 3 hours on the way back, to the point where I'm still talking on the phone with him as I'm walking into my condo where he is. And we just got to planning, and it was something that we were going to do together. I still have the little black book here that we like sketched out, like what the store was going to look like.
Oh, shit.
We wanted it to be based, so like Hinton, Landry's.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, these are men's clothing stores in
about Oxford. The truest Old South you could possibly get with clothing stores for men. And it's like, I always loved the atmosphere. Like, one of my roommates worked at Landry's, so it's like going in there and just shooting the shit with the owner. And you didn't even have to buy anything. You just came in to say hi.
Right.
And we have a bunch of those in Nashville that I grew up going to because my dad, I mean, he shoved the Brooks Brothers How to Be a Gentleman book in my face at before I could read. And he's always been very well dressed, and he's kind of the one that got me into this, you know. He probably didn't know it, and he's probably kicking himself now because I don't work with him. But it's like from an early age, it's like I loved going to clothing stores with my dad. And it's like at a time where we're growing up where it's like it wasn't cool to be fashionable. It wasn't cool to put shit in your hair. It wasn't cool to do anything that was like not masculine. And then it kind of started opening up doors. And
gel was like,
oh, I'd make fun of you. Yeah, I'd make fun of you up and down if you put anything in your hair. And now it's like,
I remember when I moved to New York, this is how stupid I was. I was like, how do these guys get their hair to stay like that? And then I was like, oh, it's gel. I didn't even know.
Jackson's the one that got me into it. And he's like, you got to buy a hairdryer. And I was like, Jackson, I'm a 25-year-old man. I was like, I'm not about to go buy a hairdryer. Next thing I know, I have a hairdryer.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I was like, the older you get, the more you don't care about what other people think. Mm-hmm. And if somebody chooses to make fun of me for what my hair looks like or how I dress, that's fine. I like it. That's all that matters. But we went up and down thinking about like men's clothing stores, and we're like, we're gonna put a bar in it. We're gonna put a place to get your hair cut, place to get your shoes shine. And then we started doing research, and I'm like, holy shit, it is expensive to start a retail store. And like 90% of them fail. And I was like, all right, well, what's plan B? And that was what really drove all of this was the custom suiting, because Jackson had worked for Tom James in Houston.
His brother worked there too, right?
In Nashville.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like our in, that we somewhat had knowledge of the industry. And I was talking to somebody else on the board of associate board for junior achievement, and we went and had a drink, and he's from Georgia. He went to UGA, was selling insurance out of college in Atlanta, and a guy that he worked under, I think it was Aflac, left to start his own custom men's clothing store or clothing company. And he was like, would you want me to connect you to him? And I was like, yeah. So Jackson and I went down to Atlanta, met with the guy. He primarily sold out of Atlanta, but was based out of Athens. And just the way he presented, when he first walked, we had drinks at a bar, and we're sitting there wearing like our best stuff. And Jackson had like a bunch of custom suits from Tom James. I'm pretty sure I was wearing Joseph Bank. And this guy like walks in, and everything that he was wearing, I'm like, I want that. Like everything that he put together, from the tie, he wore bow ties. I don't wear bow ties, but
yeah,
like pocket square, jacket,
just
patterns, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And we were blessed that he walked us through the industry, how to get into it. He was like, look, if y'all want to, sell yourselves, but go through me, I can train you. I can teach you how to measure. Jackson already had some knowledge. So I think he worked there for a little less than a year in Houston until he moved back to Nashville. And so we just hit the ground running. We picked a name that was a dog that was previously Jackson's, and then I kind of adopted him. And it was like his collar. It was Green Collar Clothiers.
What was the name of that?
Green Collar Clothiers.
Okay.
It's a mouthful looking back on it. We had a bunch of like marketing ideas, like it was gonna be green underneath the collar, and it was like after his logo on his collar that he wore, because it was this like neon green collar that everybody knew him for. And then, it was probably a couple months, 3-4 months. Jackson always wanted to get into personal training. So when the guy asked me the question, what is it that you love to do? It's like I think I asked Jackson that same question. I think his was a completely different answer. But at the time, he and I didn't have a pot to pee in. I was driving for Uber. He was driving, I think, like Postmates. We had
for Uber.
I drove for Uber for a year and a half. I'd be wearing a suit, picking people up. And like, so
it's like a marketing thing.
Unintentionally, it was more because I was in between appointments. Uber is the only thing I could like pick up, start when I wanted to, and turn it off when I wanted to. I had other part-time jobs to like make ends meet, and
I feel like there's so many people that would have quit at the time it came down to them having to drive for Uber and would have never gotten to this.
It was one of the most demoralizing. Originally, when I first started out, like I was so embarrassed about it. Like you're supposed to put the thing in your windshield. I like taped it up and would take it down as soon as I was done.
Like the light up thing. So
I was like, I don't want people knowing that I drive Uber. And I picked up a few people that I went to high school with that were like younger than me. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm trying to make it. And I'm like embarrassed about driving for Uber. And then finally I got to the point where I was like, I've got to feed myself. I've got to feed my dog. I've got bills I've got a mortgage to pay. I was like, I don't give a shit where the money's coming from as long as it's legal. Like, I'm going to do it.
That's why it's so important, too, that you actually had a goal that, like, this is what you wanted to do, right? If you were just starting some company to make a buck, I don't feel like you ever would have had most people, right?
People are like, oh, being an entrepreneur at school. I was like, no, it sucks ass. It's my least favorite thing to do is to run a business. And that kind of sounded harsh. I do love running my business, but that's not why I do it. If I wasn't as passionate about custom clothing and apparel, then I would never have done this in a million. I would have gone to work for somebody else.
Yeah. You can put the other job, a normal job away.
Yeah.
And leave the office.
And it slowly, and we were talking about it before we got on here, but like I didn't pay myself much. I paid myself like literally as least amount as possible to still get by and to still stay in a relatively decent tax bracket. But I had an assistant that was before me, or before the one that I'm working with now, she's awesome. But they found out that they were making more money than me. And I was like, sucks. Like, that's sometimes what it takes.
It's so funny because, business owners, I just feel like get not crapped on, but people think it's just this like glamorous thing. But you're the last fucking person that gets paid, right?
Yeah. And
all your vendors get paid. The rent gets paid.
And
your employees get paid.
People are like, oh, you grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I was like, yeah, but I didn't pay enough attention growing up to when my dad, he had like a disaster happen at his company. He stores boxes of paper for a living. They had a fire. Literally the most catastrophic, like nothing worse can happen to your business of what you do than having a fire when you store paper for a living. And he told me, he was like, your mom and I went like years without taking paychecks. And we had to meet payroll. We had to pay people. We were going through lawsuits and all this other thing. And it's like, growing up, I had no idea. I was going to a private school. My dad was like, we lived off $5 a day between your mom and I to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was like, that's weird because we had like a cooked meal at home by mom. But he's like, yeah, well, we were having to literally penny pinch. And I didn't realize at the time. Now it's like I appreciate it a hell of a lot more. Going through, and this isn't like rags to riches. It's just more of, for me, it's like I did grow up in a somewhat comfortable home that, my parents blessed us with a lot of things, but nothing was like handed to me to start this. And that's what
that makes it harder too when you go from private school, really nice stuff growing up.
I think that was the issue with Uber. Yeah. To the point where it's like Jackson and I were selling things like in my condo to like, all right, you think we can get some money for this? Like. It was bad, and it was like I was selling like all my old clothes, and I don't even know what the tipping point was to when finally I think the reason that I stopped driving Uber, I finally made it to goal where I was like, I don't like doing this. It's kind of like bartending. You're on the other side of things that you don't typically get to see that side.
Yeah.
You deal with a lot of drunk assholes. I didn't really drive at night, late at night, just because of it. And I was like, I'm not trying to have somebody throw up in my car. And I was like, I'll do
Broadway at 2 in the morning.
I'd wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'd drive Uber from like 5 until like 7:30, 8, and then I would try to have like a business day.
Probably good because you probably got a lot of business guys doing airport stuff, right?
I think I got one client out of it.
That's it, huh?
Yeah, and he was like my third client ever. I think I sold him a shirt. But then I had other people that it's like I knew of, like we had met in passing, that I'd pick them up and I'm like, keep my head down. Because it's when you're starting a business, you don't want people to think that you're failing. And if they're like, oh, he's driving Uber, he's failing. It's like, no, he's just trying to make ends meet so he can provide an opportunity for everything else. It's like I made decent money Ubering, And I wanted to bartend because I was like, all right, that's something I can make a lot of money at night. I can work during the day. But then I was like, I don't want to jump through hoops and have to be confined to like a schedule because certain people can only meet at certain times. And Uber was the one thing I could pick up and put down whenever I wanted to. I drove a horrible car for Uber because I drove a Tahoe that you would think is an XL, but I don't have a third row. And so I'm just draining gas. And that's when I started to realize early on, like, all right, opportunity cost of this is what my operating costs are to run this car. And then this is what I'm making. Then I filter out all the gas, and it was an older Tahoe, so I had like 250,000 miles on it. And I was like, I'm probably losing money at this point. And I just came to that realization, I don't want to drive Uber. I need to sell more. How do I sell more? How do I meet more people? How do I market better? So it's like
the turning point, you think?
Yeah. And people ask, like, I don't consider myself a success yet. It's like every day is better than the last, or trying to be. But when I look back on it, I'm like, my gosh, I think my first year in sales, I think it was like 40,000. And then somebody told me at one point, it's pretty cool when you are paying yourself what your sales goal used to be. And it's like you keep kind of going up. And it's like I didn't think about it until I was paying myself with like my third year sales goal was. I was like, that's pretty cool. And up until recently, one of the best decisions I've ever made, which my dad kind of not pressured me into, but he was like, you need to get a business coach. I'd always use like my dad, or when I first started, I took anybody that would have coffee with me, drinks with me, lunch with me. I took them out. I knew that they had started a company or they had like helped grow a company. I was like, I just asked them a million questions. I was probably annoying to them. Yeah. And that's why I pay it forward. I do the same thing for if anybody wants to talk to me about starting out. I was like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you a few answers that you probably don't have.
Yeah, compressed time.
Yeah. And hiring a business coach for me, it's basically like AA for sales and running a business. I just get to bitch and complain to him about
What are some of the things you guys talk about?
It's kind of funny. We have a call every other week, and it's no script. He'll ask me certain questions from issues that I'll present him with issues that I've had, whether it's a client that's causing a lot of issues, or my industry. It's you deal with a lot of prima donnas, but overall it's like nothing's life or death. When you actually think about it, like if your suit maybe doesn't come in the day that it was supposed to, and you don't need it for another week, you're not going to die. But certain issues that arise that I talk to him about, then we kind of do forecasting. He's like, when he first looked at my books and everything, it's like an Excel spreadsheet where I keep all my sales. And he's like, he laughed and he's like, this is the definition of an early entrepreneur. You're trying to make everything work, but you don't know how. It's like, you need to keep up with certain things, but you also are selling enough to where you can delegate some of that money to go towards a bookkeeper. My bookkeeper, been using him for like 3 months. It is ridiculous, the difference in actually knowing my financials. And for me, it's like, I was like, all right, don't let there be less than $1,000 in the bank account, $20,000, whatever. It's like, I never took in consideration when hiring like a marketing PR company, what the retainer was a month. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I need to sell more than that so I can afford them. Like, it was stupid how I would make decisions based off of honestly just like chance. Like, oh, I hope I can afford that. And if not, then it'll come from my pocket because I'm just not going to pay myself.
Do you try to do some sort of ROI or
figure
that out?
He's really helping me with what each individual garment is selling for, what I'm making off of it, because everything's different. Shirts, jeans, little things that kind of add up to where it's like, hey, your ROI on jeans is X, and it takes you not as much time to measure and to meet with people. Why don't you try to book more appointments during the week for that? Because it's like a nice little chunk of change. It's not as much of a profit off selling a suit, but you get enough of them in, or vice versa. It's like, hey, shirts are actually almost costing you money because you're throwing in some for free for if they purchase a lot and it's just draining you. Or do you look into opening a line of shoes, carrying various shoe brands? Because I said, and this is what's funny, is because the original goal was to start a retail store. Now I want to be furthest thing from a retail store that I possibly can. Mainly because of when COVID hit, the pandemic. Retail stores suffered because they buy their inventory a year plus in advance for what they're going to have on their shelves. That's why they have the sales at the end of each season. It's because they're trying to literally empty their shelves to put on what they've already purchased a year ago to go on the shelves. And so if you miss an entire season, you're out all that money. And you've got to do, that's why TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Steinmart, all those places, that's why they exist, is because they're buying overstock or stuff that didn't get sold, and they can sell it for its great quality, but they're selling for a lot cheaper. And I told myself, I was like, I'm never going to carry something with a size that is segregated to one person, one weight, one height, one foot size. Accessories, like we've got ties, pocket squares, that are really just complementary to when they come by to pick up their stuff. We can match up socks, pocket squares, ties. I don't carry belts. I don't carry shoes. I am looking into getting shoes solely because it's just such an easy sale when it comes to having a nice suit. You don't want to wear the same clunky shoes that you'd worn for the past 10 years. And now that I've started growing, it's like, all right, now we can look into doing stuff like that. Or we recently got into bomber jackets, leather jackets, some casual wear, jogger suits. It's like, all right, if there's a demand for it, run down that. If not, the beauty about this is that I don't have inventory. I don't have to sell something to get it off the rack. The racks look different every single day here because suits that are being finished, put on the rack, then going right back out. Yeah. 50% deposit when people come by to purchase something. That covers most of my manufacturing and other costs, to where it's like I'm not out money. That's when COVID hit. There were a lot of chosen expenses, and there are some things that I'd cut out that were buying nicer waters. Just little things that kind of add up to where it's like, all right, do you really need? And that's why it was good. I mean, I don't mean to sound insensitive. Good, a pandemic happened.
Right.
But it really made me, made me turn around and think, it's like, all right, what's actually worth us having here? And for me, it's like I never want to settle on the experience. I love when people come in and they're like, I love the shop. I love the layout. I love that it's masculine yet modern yet friendly to anybody. The experience that they have, whether it's the waters that are drinking or the coffee that we make them. Like, you have to separate yourself by somebody else. And I've only been through a few processes like mine. I wish I could go through a lot more, but I don't think now I could honestly walk into somewhere and feel comfortable like, hey, I'm going to get a custom suit. I have my own custom suit company. But kind of adapting with change. That's what I've said about restaurants. If restaurants didn't succeed, or not succeed, but did not, if they went under during COVID, there's probably a lot of reasons, but adapting to change was exactly. And it's probably insensitive to say, but for me, it's like I sell a luxury item that you wear in public that nobody was going out in public. Honestly, when people were walking in to buy a suit, I was like, where are you wearing this and why? I know it's but I mean, they were, and we figured out who were and why, and we marketed to that type of demographic and pivoted from what we originally do. And looking back on it, all these renovations, I wish we would have done during COVID, because it is not fun having people in here during an appointment with noise and stuff, but thankfully we're on the tail end of that.
So speaking of demographics, how did you get involved with like the NFL Titans scene? I know you do AJ Brown stuff.
Random.
Mahomes wear your stuff?
Yeah, Patrick.
So cool.
Patrick, I had a connection through his agent. He was an awesome guy. He's become like a mentor to me, and he doesn't even know it, but just his drive and his effort that he puts into all of his clients, all of his players. He's the one that connected me to Tua, and
yeah, I forgot he does. Yeah.
And it's like some players, it's like I DM'd on Instagram, like, hey, I have a suit company. You probably are definitely going to need a custom suit because you're not going to buy anything off the rack. And they're all a lot of fun. I mean, they have fun with the process. It's something that they're probably only going to wear once.
Are they coming here, or are you going to them?
Both. I'll go to them if they're out of state, primarily, just because they don't have the time to come here. Yeah. If they're playing in Nashville, like for Kiffin, he was playing it was a Vanderbilt game. I went to his hotel. I had a connection to him through, it was like a fraternity brothers, friends, something. And
can't even remember.
And I'm sitting there, I'm measuring Kiffin. He turns around and it's probably 101. Or if nothing else that you check, it's that.
Okay, so Kiffin just being like, how the hell do we even know each other?
Yeah. I was like, a friend of maybe another friend. I don't honestly know, but we're here now. So, and he was funny. He's very blunt, which I appreciate. Like some clients, it's like I'll ask them when they're wearing like their suit that they brought in. I was like, is there anything you would change about the fit? And they're like, yeah, I'd want it trimmer, shorter, longer, looser, whatever. And he turns around and he goes, that's your job. What would you change? And I'm like, I was not prepared for that
I feel
question.
like that's such a Kippen thing to say based on the interviews I've seen with him.
Yeah, and he's lost a tremendous amount of weight from
Yeah, he definitely looks skinnier.
past couple of years. Yeah, he's awesome at going through the whole getting back down to his fighting weight.
So are all those guys? I know we were talking about this earlier about AJ's measurements, like how how crazy they are. Are they all like that, or is Mahomes kind of just? He seems like more normally built.
He's a big guy. And it's funny to see him on the field. It's like you think that they're bigger, or you think that they're smaller, taller. Some like an offensive lineman that we had come in for the Titans. He was the tallest, but he didn't have a belly. Like it was probably a six pack underneath that shirt for all I know. But it was just weird to see how tall he was. Probably 6'7", 280. Yeah, I mean, AJ's was the most just because of that dip from his chest to his midsection that gives you that like hourglass look, to where it was just an absurd difference of what it normally is. And that's when like measuring. Most guys, when I'm measuring, it's like numbers just kind of like every guy has a wrist that is between a 6.5 and a 7.5. Not much difference. You'd think with watches and stuff that with the links that you take out, is like 8 out of 10 guys are going to have a 7-inch wrist. I've forgotten to measure a wrist before, and I was like, you know what? I could probably take a chance. It's 7 inches. But some of these NFL guys that you get in, and it's a ridiculous difference in what their measurements are. And it's like typically if that's that, then it would be something that's like right around that for another thing, but it's not. It keeps you guessing, and it's like, all right, well, that's why everything's.
I bet DK Metcalf would have some pretty interesting measurements.
Yeah, and that's somebody I've tried to get connected with because I always loved the Ole Miss ties. I mean, that's something that like I seek after working with like athletes just because it's fun. They enjoy it. They have to wear them and they're on camera, but then there's also like that. You know, people say, do you have like a dream athlete to like work with? And I said it was Kobe Bryant. That was bar none was the number one. And I was like, that would be my dream. But then it's like for other athletes, it's like, I think about like Michael Jordan, like his.
You need to get him based on those suits he used to wear.
Yeah. And it's, gosh, I mean, those guys can look the absolute best in a suit and they can look the absolute worst if they have to buy something off the rack that doesn't fit them because they are, so big, tall. Broad up top and very tall, but then it kind of darts down to where they're having to fit the shoulders and then they're having to carve up a suit just to maybe fit in the midsection.
Yeah. LeBron wears some pretty decent looking suits. They're really short though.
He would probably be the biggest like freak athlete measurements. I could probably see him being the tallest and the biggest. But we've had offensive linemen, like the guy that was 6'8", 450. I think he played at like 425.
God, that's huge.
Yeah, and some guys, it's like that's also actually a big thing for me. Is that we're celebrities. No, some guys that might be, a little heavier. That they're self-conscious about what they wear because if they buy something off the rack that fits, it's either gonna be way too long because it's having to fit.
Keep going.
They're having to fit something that has to get around certain areas. And then when they finally try it on, it's like the look on their face, they're like, oh my gosh, like this fits. It's like it clicks with them that it is possible. They don't have to feel self-conscious about wearing certain things. It's like even if you have a bigger stomach, it doesn't matter because we make things that are complementary towards your body size. My dad always jokes, he's like, I'd buy more of your suits, but you like things trim. I was like, Dad, I'm not going to make my stuff like I would make yours. There's a difference. That's why we do the preference measurements. But then we had a guy that came in, what was he? 48 inches tall with a 42-inch chest. So his chest was just as big as he was tall. And he had an 18-inch neck, which that's on the bigger side for most big guys. Literally could not find anything off the rack, but he loved to wear suits. And after his first one, it's like he wanted to come back and get more shirts and pants just because it's like you finally find something that fits. And it's like you don't have to worry about, in certain brands, it's like you get a medium in this or a large in this and then vice versa for a polo versus a button down. It's like everything in between. It's not one of those things where it's like no matter what I buy, it's always going to be consistent, which I think is one of the main reasons guys come back because they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, dude, I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah.
This was awesome. How can people get in touch with you if they want to come in here and buy a suit?
Instagram's gotten so like busy with messages and stuff that sometimes, and I hate this, but it gets like lost in the mix. And that's not like I'm getting like 1,000 messages a day. It's just that the main thing that we drive people to is the website.
Okay.
Because they can enter in all their information, request appointment times. It's way easier than, like, I'll even have friends that are very close friends that I'll say, if you go through the website, it just takes out, you know, we're process oriented and that's the easiest. But if you DM us, that's fine too.
What's the website name?
richardsbespoke.com.
Like Richards Bespoke is the Instagram handle too.
Richards_bespoke. Everyone thinks my name is Richard, which is fine. They'll come in and I'm measuring them and they're like, is Richard here? And I was like, maybe. He might be in the back somewhere. Which at first I was like, took offense. I was like, I thought I was building a brand and I was like, I don't really care that's around me, but I want to get some recognition for it. And then I was like, oh, that's fine because if they don't know, doesn't matter. Still getting a good fitting suit. Yeah,
they're definitely going to get that. Well, again, I appreciate it. This is awesome. Super interesting. It's a great store. I need to reconsider what I'm wearing after this combo.
That's what everybody's like. I feel like like my girlfriend, she's like, do I have to get dressed up too if we're going? I was like, no, I'm always in a suit, I know, but whatever.
Love it. All right, man.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah.